Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson. Business has a big role to play in changing our world and is changing our world now. My guest today, we're going to talk about sustainable business. I'm with Jill Bamburg, who's with Bainbridge Graduate Institute. Welcome.
That's right. Thank you.
Glad you're here.
Thank you.
What is the Bainbridge Graduate Institute and why is it different from a business school?
Well, that's a good question. First of all, it is a business school.
Oh.
We award an MBA degree, but we award a degree that has a focus on sustainable business, which is different than the way in which much of business is practiced and certainly taught today. We're a relatively new institution. We're about 4 years old. At this point, we have about 100 students. We've been on a very fast ramp from 10 students our first year to 100 students in our fourth year.
You're doing something right.
Well, we hope so. We hope so. We think so.
Well, those students would seem to say so, to have more people coming here.
Yeah.
What are you doing that isn't like everybody else?
Well, pretty much everything we do is not like everybody else. Although, I have to say, we do cover the core MBA curriculum. The same basic information about finance, accounting, strategy, operations, marketing, and so on as other schools. The difference is that when we teach those things, we embed sustainability considerations into every one of those courses as well as financial considerations. And then in addition to that, we offer a concentration in 3 additional areas. One is the area of entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. A second is the area of sustainability specifically. And then the third is the area of management and leadership, where we believe our students are going to need to excel to change the world in the directions that we're looking for.
Tell us a little bit more about each of those 3 areas, because there's some words that slip by there that are kind of different.
Okay, so the first word and the most important word is sustainability.
Yeah.
And the question people always ask is, what is sustainability and what is sustainable business and what does that mean? And in business, people usually talk about sustainability in terms of the triple bottom line. So conventional business talks about the single bottom line, which is the financial bottom line. Either you made money or you didn't make money.
Right.
In sustainable business, you look at the triple bottom line, which is, did you do something good for the planet? Yes or no? Did you do something good for the people of the planet? Yes or no? And did you make a profit? Yes or no?
So you're looking at a financial bottom line, an environmental bottom line, and a human social bottom line.
Right.
Wow, that's doing good on all the levels.
Exactly. And one of the interesting things about it, and it's kind of a current debate, is in conventional ways of thinking about business, those 3 bottom lines would be regarded as something you'd have to trade off against each other. So you could be profitable, and if you were willing to be less profitable, then you could also be environmentally and socially conscious.
Yes.
But you couldn't do all 3.
Yes.
The thing that we're trying to work on is kind of a synergistic triple bottom line, where by doing things that are good for people and good for the planet, you also make a profit. And that may sound idealistic, but it is possible a fair number of times. The key, though, is to believe that it's possible and not just to accept the traditional notions about how you do business.
So the first thing you have to do is change the mindset.
Exactly, exactly.
And when you change the mindset, then people start to get, I expect, creative.
Right.
Which is where your entrepreneuring may show up.
Right,
here, and come up with ideas that can meet those triple bottom lines.
Exactly. Exactly. And so, you know, at BGI, we think that sustainability and innovation are tightly coupled. And one of the reasons that we offer a focus on entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship being entrepreneurship inside of an established institution or organization, is that we think the kind of energy and insights that are going to need to be applied to make sustainable business really happen are in fact entrepreneurial and intrapreneurial. And the more you know about how to establish new ventures and get them going, the better able you'll be to make them sustainable.
So just to explain, an entrepreneur is someone that what?
An entrepreneur is someone who starts something from nothing. Our founder, Gifford Pinchot, calls entrepreneurs the dreamers who do. And the idea is that these are people who have grand visions, but they're not happy to stop there. They've got to keep going until they make it happen in the world. They have some part of that
happen. That's great.
Exactly.
Which is what we need now. I mean, you're right. You have to start with the mindset to shift to say that we can meet that triple bottom line of serving in all ways. But then we need to see it in practice, because that's where the edges get, Where the rubber meets the road.
Right, right. Where you can find out whether you're real or whether you're just daydreaming.
Or what does it take in this culture or in this climate that we're in.
Right, exactly. So sustainability is this notion of a triple bottom line, or business that does well by the planet and its people. Entrepreneurship is kind of the energy and the approach that fuels that. And then the third important area is leadership and management. And one of the things that's different about our program is we devote fully 1/4 of our curriculum, 15 units of credit, to the area of leadership and management. In a typical MBA program, you would be required to take one class in organizational behavior, and you might have some other electives. But there's a very famous management professor named Henry Mintzberg who teaches up at McGill in Canada, who has had a long-standing critique of the MBA, the traditional MBA program, and he says, you know, it might be a master's of something, but it's not a master's in management, and it's not really teaching people how to manage. And in our case, we think that it's going to be absolutely critical that people understand how organizations work, how you get things done in organizations, how you lead people in a way that inspires them and changes their ways of thinking. Those are critical skills.
Are you thinking of different models of leadership than the standard sort of pyramid guy, the guy at the top? I mean,
right, right. I mean, I think the notion of servant leadership, which has been around for a long time now, is a fairly accurate way of doing things.
Tell us about that. What is servant leadership?
Well, in part, it's the idea that the leader's job is to empower his or her subordinates to do great things in the world. And it's not to you know, keep close tabs on them or manage them or, you know, keep their noses to the grindstone. It's really to remove obstacles and get things out of the way that interfere with their performance. You know, my favorite diagram is actually one from Jan Carlson. He's with one of the airlines, I can't remember which, but it's an inverted pyramid, and it puts the manager or the leader at the bottom, and all of the people as you get closer and closer to the customer up towards the top. And the job of the managers is, again, to make it possible for the customers, for the people in the organization who are closest to the customers, to do the very best job they possibly can.
I remember in working in Xerox, how they were struggling to do that. And those of us, I mean, it was a novel thing for those of us in the development group to go meet with the customers and find out what they really were trying to do with our products. Right. It was new at that time. I mean, that was a decade and a half ago. Right. But it was a prevailing mindset. And I see that you're at the forward edge of change here, of mindset and practices. Right. And I think, you know, there's a lot of good work that's being done in a number of different places. One of the advantages of being independent is we're able to get out way ahead of the curve and not have to answer to you know, a whole institutional bureaucracy or a traditional way of doing things. And one of the great benefits is that, you know, the problems of sustainability and the problems of carrying the world forward at this point do not present themselves in neat silos the way that most business schools or most academic institutions are organized. And so we're actually able to do things across classes and look at problems more holistically. So you're doing a new model of education while you're at it. Yeah, just just along the way. I mean, just yeah, exactly. And then we also have a new delivery model, which also is an important part of what we're up to. And the delivery model is one that's designed to meet the needs of working adult students, which is our student population. And it's basically 1 3-day weekend intensive per month, where we're all face-to-face, gathered from around the country. And then in between, we do distance learning using a fairly powerful online platform. And the combination of those two things is what produces a really high quality, highly energized interaction. So you are both high tech because of your online services and high touch in that you get to meet each other and create a community of learners. Yeah, I mean, it's very much a learning community model, and we start out with a 5-day retreat at a conference center on Cortes Island up in British Columbia that is an old 140-acre property, has a 90-year-old organic garden on it that is feeding us. It's completely off the grid. We have solar showers. Our students sleep in tents, by and large, and we live there in community for 5 days, experiencing what it's like to live a sustainable and yet very comfortable and extremely well-fed lifestyle in community. That's really heartening to me, because I could imagine instead being wrapped with, you know, all kinds of electronic gadgets only. Right. And that's not part of what our world is.
Right.
for people to experience being connected to the earth and the seasons, and to be in touch with the roots of where that water is coming from, where's that energy coming from. If you're on solar, you're going to be paying attention to
Right.
conserving,
Right.
which has got to be one of the models is important now in business.
Absolutely. When the sun doesn't shine on Cortez, we have to adjust our shower schedule. I mean, it's definitely true. Yeah, and eventually we would have to adjust our energy usage, but we're on fairly low energy usage up there anyway.
So your students are coming, so they're working adults.
Right.
So they're having to fit this in along with their work schedule. Now, what about how are they taking what they're learning? What are your alumni doing with what they've done, what they've learned?
They're doing a wide variety of things, and I guess our most recent sort of poster child alum is the first corporate social responsibility manager for the Recreational Equipment, Inc., REI. Based here in Seattle. And he's basically building from scratch a whole corporate social responsibility structure. So that's his job. We have other students who are in large corporations. One of the ones that has contributed many students to us is Hewlett-Packard, which is very forward-looking in the environmental area. And we've had probably a half a dozen of their employees go through as students. And most of them end up staying with Hewlett-Packard and doing work inside that corporation after they graduate. But they do it with new skills and new interests and a new network of people that they can draw upon to make things happen there. We have some students who come in from the nonprofit world, some who are looking to make a transition to the for-profit world, and others who are simply looking for a way to be more effective in the nonprofit. So some students stay with that kind of an activity.
Because I'm sure that those principles you're talking about are just as critical for the nonprofit world. I mean,
absolutely.
Except that they still have to be fiscally sound, even if they're not making a profit.
Right, absolutely. So, they have to support themselves and provide for the future. So our students are doing all sorts of different things, and we expect that to just continue to flower and become more diverse all the time.
I'm sure it will.
And the goal, in part, is that the 2 years or 3 years that they spend with us as students is really just the first part of our association with them. In fact, one of our admissions people jokes that the 2-year MBA program is really just an initiation into the Alumni Association. And the idea is that over time we'll have a network of people out there in the world who are social change agents, who are extremely well connected with each other, who can be a very powerful network for social change out in the world after they graduate.
That's a really powerful idea here, is to not just lose track of your alumni,
but have them
work with each other and reinforce.
This is not just a 2-year program. This is a lifetime enterprise.
You thought you were going for class for 2 years, but we're married now.
Right, and exactly. And the students are always glad that they don't have to do any more homework, but they're really, really sorry that they won't be with each other every single month. It's a very, very powerful, highly bonded community.
You must enjoy doing this. How did you get here from wherever you were?
Well, I would say divine providence, because this is exactly the job that I couldn't have built or thought of or invented a better job than this for me. I've had a long-standing interest in the environment and a long-standing interest in business. Have done professional work in both areas, and when I got sort of through my longest running ever midlife crisis that was in the Guinness Book of World Records, I think, and finally figured out what I wanted to do, I said that I wanted to do work at the intersection of business and the environment. And lo and behold, within 6 months of getting clear about that, this particular opportunity showed up.
So you have been on the ground floor of Bainbridge Graduate Institute and watched it growing.
Yeah, it's been very exciting. Kind of scary sometimes, but absolutely wonderful.
Well, that's part of being on the edge of the new.
Yeah.
Now, you've also just finished a book.
I have.
Tell us about this, what it is and what's it saying here.
I happen to have a copy right here, and I'd be happy to hold it up and show it. The book is called Getting to Scale, Growing Your Business Without Selling Out. And Barrett Kohler is the publisher. And it's a book basically about how can values-based or mission-driven companies get to a larger than ma and pa size, and how can they do that without either having to sell out to a larger corporation to bring them out to a larger public, or sell out their values somewhere along the way. And it's based on, I did a couple of years of research. I talked to about 30 different companies all over the US and Canada, and heard fascinating stories, fell in love with 30 entrepreneurs, got totally inspired, and then tried to extract from their individual stories the lessons that might be passed on to other people who wanted to do that.
And I'd love to hear a little bit about that, because we've been talking in some of our Peak Moment shows with small farming operations that when they attempt to move to a larger scale, it's just not affordable for them. They're not getting the return. There's more work. What did you learn from them?
Well, I mean, that particular sector, the food and agriculture sector, has some very specific problems and some very specific opportunities. One of the things that's interesting is most of the organic food labels that you see in a mainstream supermarket at this point are really owned now by a handful of companies. The brands are in there as freestanding brands, but the ownership structure is actually in the larger corporations, because it is so difficult to get a decent position on the supermarket shelf and to be able to afford to put your product into broad-scale distribution. So, but the brand is an organic brand, and the brand is extremely valuable. And so Earth's Best baby food, for example, I think is owned by General Mills. Well, Earth's Best used to be a freestanding company, but that brand and the notion of organic baby food is a very powerful idea. When General Mills bought the company, they bought the brand, and that was what was important to them. So the question is, how can you stay independent and still own your own future and go it on your own, or can you? Because
I would expect once General Mills has bought
Earth's Best, then
if they decide, well, we'll define organic our own way, because that's starting to come up now.
That's starting to come up.
Or we'll allow some GMOs or whatever it is, then the values that whoever started Earth's Best had in creating organic baby food those values may not be maintained when it's sold off.
Right, and I think that's one of the, that's a really critical issue for companies. Part of the issue is if you can build one of the messages that I got from the book and from talking to these people is, if you can build the value, the core value into your brand of, we are a non-NGMO baby food, and that's what you're buying when you buy this, and that's, given, then even if a large multinational comes and buys you, that's what they bought, is that reputation and that guarantee to the customer. And if they, go back on that, they've lost the value of what they purchased. So,
and you're hoping that the people either will scream, he's like, you've betrayed what you've bought here.
Right. But I think, the next stage beyond organic is local.
Yes.
And so as people are attempting to combat this trend about consolidation in organic foods, they're looking at, well, local. And, how do you address that particular issue? But the interesting thing in agriculture is there are some absolutely wonderful producer cooperatives that are addressing the issues of scale in agriculture in ways that preserve family farms, and probably the biggest and the best known of those is Organic Valley family of farms based out of the Midwest.
Right, okay. So you have a big distribution network under that cooperative, but you still have all the small farms.
Exactly.
Well, that's a cooperative model.
That's right. And some of these businesses, not all of them, but some of them are cooperative models, and that's a very powerful model. It works in some areas.
Because you've got people owning their own entity, right?
Right. And you have, in most of the cooperative models, the goal is to align the interests of producers and consumers and to eliminate middlemen. And that's one very powerful model. On the other hand, within the research for the book, I found people that were chartered as for-profit businesses, doing just fine and maintaining their mission and providing a great service to I found people in nonprofit organizations learning how to make money and yet not compromise their values. So it turned out that corporate form wasn't as important of a variable as some other things. Probably the most important variable is, where'd you get your money to finance your growth?
Oh,
that's the critical issue.
What did you learn there?
Well, the title of the chapter on that is called Finance Your Independence. And what it means is, don't just finance your business, finance your ability to be independent and to maintain it according to your values. And there are some ways of doing that that are better than others. The best way is actually to bootstrap, to use your own sales to finance your business and not have to borrow money or sell shares or do anything else. One of the implications of that is, if you're going to grow that way, you're probably going to grow at a slightly slower growth rate than a business that's bringing in a whole lot of outside funding. So one of the messages of the book is, maybe you need to grow more slowly than the traditional model about how you get to scale. So that's important. Banks are a good source of financing, or can be, particularly once you've established that you are bankable,
yes,
which is a later stage of development for some companies. But at least the banks aren't biased against businesses that are socially responsible or trying to achieve a bottom line in much the same way that equity investors, for example, traditional equity investors are. They believe in this trade-off model. And if you believe in the trade-off model, then you think that the value of your investment is going to be depressed by these other kinds of values commitments. Whereas if you believe in a synergistic model, you actually can understand how that might increase your value proposition.
Where do you see this kind of, business, sustainable business? Is it starting to penetrate more into the business community, this discussion of responsible, socially or environmentally responsible? How do right. You're at the forward edge.
Right, right.
There's a lot of things built, for example, into the corporate structure requiring the financial return or the shareholders, being responsible to the shareholders and not to the local people or the local environment. You're working with a system here,
right?
And the corporate structure,
right?
How do you get that to be responsible?
Right. Well, within the sustainability community, there's a huge amount of conversation about the business case for sustainability. And there is, in fact, a very strong and increasingly strong business case for sustainability. And that's the pitch that we use in corporations. It's not about do the right thing. It has nothing to do with that. It's about here's what you can do that's going to be good for the earth, that's going to make you more money than what you are currently doing.
In our last couple minutes, because we've only got... Give me an example of that.
There's a ton of them. So the first is if you are more energy efficient and do good for the environment in that way, you will make more money because you'll spend less money on energy. Okay?
Good.
Also, if you are obeying the environmental standards that are in Europe, which are more restrictive than the environmental standards in the United States, then you increase your efficiency as a company because you're able to build one product for global markets. Okay? So even though our standards might be lower in the United States, you want to build a global product and get the cost savings there, build it to the European standard, the more restrictive standard. Third example, and this is one that's big right now, is in the area of risk. There are a whole bunch of organizations that are not adequately managing the climate risk to their business or the potential environmental risks, and institutional investors and other players like insurance companies are starting to penalize those companies and charge them more money. Well, behave in a responsible fashion, it'll save you on your insurance premiums, it'll boost the stock price, and why wouldn't you? So there are forces at work, even on the publicly traded companies, to get them to move in a more sustainable direction.
What I hear is that sustainability is about more efficiencies, which we should be doing anyway, which are also going to help with the climate change and also help be more resilient as the energy prices go up, which they certainly will as oil peaks here, and natural gas as well. And I would imagine another area is also just the use of materials and reuse of materials so that we are not throwing away everything to the landfill. So if you can turn it around and sell it for somebody else to use for another product, or use it yourself for another product.
The basic deal is business wants to reduce costs, and you can reduce costs by eliminating waste, and when you eliminate waste, you're also doing good for the environment. So it's a very simple equation to sell that way. The other way to sell it, though, and it's equally important, is where are the new opportunities? The whole world needs to be reinvented in a way that will work better than it does right this minute. Where are the new opportunities? They're all in the area of sustainability. I mean,
sure, that would make sense.
So this is not only a way to save money, it's also a way to generate new sources of revenue, which are future-oriented, and all businesses are interested in doing that as well.
That's exciting. So in your last, we've got a couple minutes here. What haven't we covered?
Well, I think I guess the most important thing is what kind of a world do we want to inhabit, and what is the role of business in that world? Historically, a lot of people who are idealists have kind of written off the business sector, and they've said, well, I'll go to work for a nonprofit, or I'll go to work for the government regulators that are making business behave responsibly. And I think increasingly there are a lot of young people and a lot of people who are interested in making business be part of the solution as opposed to part of the problem. And I personally believe that there's a huge power in getting business engaged in these problems. Business is a great problem-solving engine, and if we can show people that there are opportunities here, I think the future is going to be much, much better.
It strikes me that business is where the huge amount of the power is right now on the planet. And you can't exclude that from the equation, because it's going to continue to work. People are going to continue to buy products and produce things and make services and so on. And you can't ignore that.
Right. You can't ignore that, but you can harness it and use it and point it in the right direction. And that's what we're all about.
What's exciting is that you've got examples. You're bringing in faculty. You have visiting faculty.
Yeah, our faculty are drawn from all over the country.
So that you've got innovative thinkers that are at your beck and call. I mean, you're not sort of stuck in the old institutional model of tenured people necessarily that are going to say the same things for 48 years, because you're an entrepreneurial organization yourself.
Very much so. Very much so.
Well, I wish you well. I am glad you are here, and more power to you. And
well, thank you.
Thank you for being here, and I think that we'll look forward to your students coming out and changing the world.
Good. Absolutely.
Thank you. This is Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson, and you're hearing Community Responses for a Changing Energy Future. Join us next time.